Okay, Chairman, we're now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a virtual meeting of the Corporate Services, Commerce and Communities Policy Overview Committee of the London Borough of Hillingdon. This virtual meeting is also being broadcast simultaneously on the Council's YouTube channel, which is Hillingdon London. My name is Councillor Richard Mills and I'm Chairman of the meeting this evening. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance and local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. For those of you present during the meeting and intending to speak, please note that you'll be filmed and any statements that you make will be recorded and made public. Before we start, some online housekeeping for everyone present. As always, please ensure that any mobile phones around you are on silent. If you have a headset, ensure that the microphone is away from your mouth to avoid any noise or interference. And please keep yourself muted when not speaking and then unmute to speak. It generally works best if we only have one person speaking at a time. And I, as chairman, will call those to speak. And I will also allow you a supplementary question before moving to another member to ensure that all those wishing to speak have the opportunity. So if you'd like to speak, please use a raise hand icon or grab my attention and I'll acknowledge that before calling you to speak during the meeting. Before we move on to the agenda, I'd just like to do a roll call of the councillors and everyone else present to confirm attendance. So grateful if you can confirm that you're present when I say your name. Councillor Bridges.
Good evening, Chairman, I'm present.
Councillor Nicola Brightman.
Good evening, Chairman and everyone, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Deville.
Evening, Councillor, I'm present.
Councillor Farhad Chubadar.
Good evening, Chairman, I am present.
Councillor Jazz Dillon.
Good evening, Chairman and everybody, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Lindsay Bliss.
Good evening, I'm present.
And Councillor Scott Farley.
Good evening, Chairman, present.
Thank you very much. We're also joined by a number of officers this evening, so grateful if you can confirm you're present and indicate that you're in the meeting. So firstly, Dan Kennedy, Director of Planning, Environment, Education and Community Services.
Good evening, Chairman, I'm present.
Thank you. Fiona Gibbs, our Stronger Communities Manager.
Good evening, I'm present.
Haygarth, Climate Action Manager.
Good evening, Chairman, I am present.
And Liz Penny, our Democratic Services Officer.
Good evening, present Chairman.
Thank you very much. In terms of technical meeting control, if any councillor should leave the meeting partway through for a period of time, be that a lost connection, the meeting will continue unless we are not quorate. And quorum for this meeting is 5 councillors. Details of the business to be considered is available on today's agenda, which has been circulated to all members, and copies are also available on YouTube beneath the broadcast. So with all that now completed, I'm pleased to be able to move to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence.
Apologies have been received this evening from Councillor Vanessa Harangi, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 2 is any declarations of interest coming before us this evening. In the absence of seeing any notification from anybody, I take it that there are no interests. Thank you. Agenda item 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of March 2021. Does anyone have any comments on those? I don't see anything, so happy to note those as agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 4 is around the exclusion of press and public. The majority of items are part 1 tonight. However, we do have the prevent topic, which is also classified as part 2. And the reason for this is that depending on the nature of the questions that may arise around this, it may contain confidential or sensitive information which should not be shared in a public domain. Members are free to ask questions around this issue when it is discussed under agenda item 8, however cognizant of that fact, and we will take a lead and guide from Fiona Gibbs, the officer on this item, as to whether an answer can be provided for this in part 1, or if an answer on a specific question that is raised should be provided within part 2. But equally, don't want to seem holding members back, so feel free to ask your question. However, we may just need to defer to part 2 for when it can be answered, given the nature of information that's involved. Thank you very much. So that we will now move to agenda item 5, which is our review around the voluntary sector, our major review around the voluntary sector. So this was the major review on voluntary sector response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Hopefully your members have received the draft report that has been put together very kindly by Liz in Democratic Services, which encompasses a number of recommendations that we agreed at the previous meeting, but also includes a lot of the detail around it and tightened up some of the recommendations based on the feedback and discussion that we had in the previous meeting. So really open this up if people had a chance, hopefully people have had a chance to read it. Does anyone have any comments or questions they'd like to raise around the report? Okay, I don't see anyone indicating, so I think we are happy then to take that as an agreed final report, and we will now work with Democratic Services to move this to present towards Cabinet in the near future. So thank you very much for everyone on your work and contribution and efforts towards that. I think that's a good report we've put together as a committee with a number of recommendations that hopefully we can see followed through on once we present to Cabinet. That then takes us to agenda item 6, the committee's next review topic. So items for consideration within this. Councillor Bridges, I know you indicated previously or outside of the meeting that you had something that you thought could be considered either as a review or as a future information item, if you wanted to share that.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My sort of thought process was in regards to our armed forces and how we engage with them as part of our democratic process and how they participate in our electoral process at election times, which I believe Democratic Services is under our remit as a POC. So I think perhaps an early scoping report, just how they engage with us as a council and vice versa, would be a good step and see how that process works and whether improvements could be made to further improve our engagement with the armed forces.
Thank you. Yeah, I think my my initial view on that would probably be an information item rather than too much of an in-depth report, but I think it would be something we can have scoped out through Democratic Services. Councillor Farley, you indicated?
Thank you, Chairman. I know we obviously last year we did the topic over jobs and skills, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that we have a issue with our high streets, generally speaking, but also the impact that COVID has made to them. I'm wondering whether or not it was something that we can look at in how the council is working to develop our high streets and how helping them recover. And because it is a live issue, it's something that you know, we can sort of be on top of as it goes through. I know that we did the jobs and skills thing, but I think that it's because that was impacted by the COVID crisis. I think that this might be something that we can look at as we sort of come out of the lockdowns and as we progress through. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon, so you indicate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, mine is on procurement. As we are most likely to enter into another round of bid process, etc. Just to see how the procurement department is involved, what they're hoping to achieve in the forthcoming years around procurement, and kind of where we're at. Is their job becoming even more difficult as we streamline more and more? Where are those efficiencies to be found? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Troubadour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I would like us to do is to a review of ICT and digital, especially our plans for post-COVID development and information on the existing projects which the ICT is undertaking. Major projects, I mean, rather than all the projects.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think so. At the minute, we'll just go around getting ideas from people, and then I think I'll come back with comments, my initial comments, if that's all right. Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to follow on what Councillor Dillon was suggesting, I did have procurement down myself as well. Mine in particular was procurement process for small businesses. How do we make it easier for local businesses in Hillingdon to apply for small tenders advertised by the council? Are we also doing enough to advertise the process to allow local enterprise to participate?
Thank you very much. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Possibly just a short report on facilities management and around our property. In part, Civic is now an old building. We have a antiquated, possibly heating system and air conditioning system. In light of COVID and within energy concerns, what are we doing to either look at installing new equipment or updating it? What are the costs and efficiencies, and what are our strategic plans in combining both facility side of it with COVID response, because all those units need to be cleaned, etc., and the air within our building needs to be cleaned, but also in terms of energy efficiency.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to throw anything else into the pot while we got these? Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a suggestion for an information report was disability access in our public buildings, just to review what they are currently at and if anything can be improved.
Okay, thank you. Taking a note on all of those. So I think just to run through high level, yeah, I think these are all pretty good. The majority of these, I think, are information items, mostly on the shorter side, which is fine. The one that I think probably has more legs is the one that Councillor Farley talked around town centre and regeneration. Obviously, we've done work on town centres, but like the point you made, the economic situation, local situation is now slightly different to where it was before, so that could be a different approach. And also, I think the point that Councillor Bridges made around how do we help local businesses get involved in tender process, I think that could almost link into that small business high street element as well, almost a double-sided benefit from the procurement piece. I think the procurement piece is not a standing item, but we've looked at it before. But again, I think it's certainly a very valid point that circumstances have changed and is worth revisiting in terms of how do we continue to get value for money, like Councillor Dillon says. How do we revisit the contracts that we've done before? How do we continue to find those efficiencies? Councillor Dillon, just in terms of where you talked around the facilities and property management, were you talking there around the civic centre, so like aircon and effectively infrastructure that we have in this building?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that will make sense. So I think the takeaway from these is that we can get scoping reports or at a high level on most of these. Councillor Tuber, in terms of ICT and digital projects, is that something you're just looking to get or you're interested in having an update into what the ICT department are working on, or is there something almost specific that you think the council is glaringly missing out on with your own experience in terms of IT?
It's two things. One's to get some information and updates on all the existing developments, and the second thing is really our ICT and digital strategy for the future, and what are we planning to do in the next 4 to 6 years.
Okay, and this is inward looking. This is all central under the central services and ICT part in terms of staff that work for the council in the civic centre. What is their IT offering?
Yes, and also what as a council we are going to plan to do in the next 4 to 6 years. Post-COVID is a different world as far as ICT is concerned, and communication.
Okay.
If you like, I can provide you with further details post this meeting, and then you could see a broader view of what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah, certainly. I think that would be useful again, especially if we're looking to engage with officers around putting a scoping report together. To then, if the ask is clear, then we can make sure that they're looking to provide an answer that satisfies our needs. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you.
You're still on mute, I'm afraid.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. Just with regards to the one that I spoke about, facilities management, would it be also sensible to look at the way that we use our building, the space that we use at the moment? Over the last 4 years, I suppose, and the bid process, etc., efficiencies have been made. The number of people working within the council has reduced, not significantly, but it has reduced by a fair number. How are we using that space these days? Are there opportunities that exist in consolidating what we use and then renting out other bits? I mean, has that been looked at? Where have we got to with that? I'm sure it has crossed somebody's mind within cabinet and someone's looked at it, but it'd be good to get that information.
Yeah, okay, so almost like a broad approach of our property and facilities across not just the civic centre but other council-owned properties and where council staff are based. How do we use that? Is there opportunity for scope or improvement across that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that makes sense to me. Anyone else have anything they wish to add on those? I think that we've got a number of good things to take away to certainly look into. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to essentially endorse what Councillor Bridges said about looking at the disability access. I think that would be quite invaluable to look at as well. Thank you. Okay,
thank you. Liz, is that okay from what we've gone through there? Do we think we have enough topics to be able to go and build scoping reports or go away and find out further information on these and see which are feasible at a high level? The topics members have discussed certainly seem to fall within our remit, which is obviously a great start. I just want to make sure that you think we've got topics we can engage with officers on around here.
Yes, Chairman, I think there's a number of very interesting ideas that have been put forward, and as far as I can see, certainly initially it would appear that they all fit within the remit of the POC, so that's a good starting point. So I think the best thing now would be for me to go away and discuss with officers outside of the meeting, at a higher level which of those would perhaps be the easiest one to, or the best one to focus on at this point, and the most feasible, and we can revisit at the next meeting if that's okay with all the members.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you to everybody. I think we had some good suggestions there. And again, I think, like Councillor Tubert I mentioned, if there's anything real specific that you would like to make sure is covered, do drop Liz and Democratic Services an email. Feel free to copy me in if you wish. But to identify any areas of pinpointing in terms of activity that you'd like to ensure is covered, please. Right, thank you very much, everybody, for that. So that will move us to agenda item 7, which is the Climate Change Action Plan. So I'm pleased to pass to David, who's going to present and talk us through this item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I've taken the liberty of putting together a very short presentation. Bearing in mind this is being streamed to perhaps help any others watching, just give them some sort of idea of the structure that we followed in putting this plan together. So if you're happy for me to put that up now, I will carry on. Excuse me. Is that presentation visible, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, it is. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So within this presentation, I just want to focus on a couple of different aims. First of which is why do we actually need a plan in the first place? Then we want to look at the draft action plan itself and the 3 climate change commitments that have been made. Then we want to look at the carbon emissions we're actually measuring that are in scope for the plan, and then think about some of the themes that we wish to address through the plan. Then I'll just move on very briefly to the consultation process that's currently underway and hopefully take some questions at the end. So moving on, why do we need a plan? Many of us will all be aware of the threats posed by climate change. At the global level, we're thinking about changes in weather patterns, we're looking at resource depletion, and even matters of national security, how the climate changes, things will affect us in the years to come. So it's important at an international and national context. We then also have the local context, where we think more closely about flash flooding, air quality, and also living standards that would affect our residents. But at the same time, we also want to think about some of the opportunities presented by climate change and some of the activities we can pursue to help adapt and mitigate to it, but also tick some of the boxes of sustainability. So we look at sustainable responses, and we also think about our duties and powers as a local authority related to the promotion of well-being. So if we look at some of the opportunities, as I mentioned, it's an opportunity to promote sustainable outcomes. And when I'm talking about that, I'm thinking of economic, social and environmental parameters that all overlap. And somewhere at the centre, you're finding yourself with a sustainable response. You're doing good things for the environment, you're doing good things for residents on a social level and a public health level, but you're also promoting economic growth as well. And a good applied example of that might be a fuel poverty scheme or a strategy where the council and central government make funding available to promote insulation programs in housing. And the result of that is an improvement in living standards for the resident, it's a reduction in carbon emissions, but also inward investment to the area and potentially cash savings for residents. So that's an example of how all those things overlap. So we made 3 corporate commitments in this draft plan, and the first one is around community leadership. So we want to be seen as community leaders, as the local authority, and the statement that we made is that we wish to lead and inspire our residents, businesses and schools to reduce their own carbon emissions. So what we're saying here is where we don't actually have control over somebody else's emissions, we want to take the role of the leader to give them an idea of how they can do more to reduce their impact on the environment and help defer climate change. Our second corporate commitment is to become carbon neutral by 2030, and this really does apply to the emissions that we can control. So it's public access buildings like the Civic Centre and where we are paying for the energy supplies, and it's our fleet vehicles and highway assets like street lighting and car parks. Part and parcel of that is where we try to reduce our emissions as far as possible. We want to also be using clean energy as far as possible, and that would involve the use of electrical energy sourced from wind turbines, solar schemes, and supplied to us through the local and national grid. And our approach to doing that is to, wherever we can, reduce our fossil fuel use in some of our older, less efficient buildings, purchase green energy where we can, but where we can no longer reduce our emissions any further or purchase green energy, then we look to a process of carbon offsetting, which I'll come on to in a little bit. So these are the emissions in scope, and hopefully that's visible to you or not too small. But what we're saying here is we've made substantial progress in our gas and electricity in our corporate buildings and street lighting over the last 10 years or so, and also on our fleet vehicles. And we're at a position now where we have a emissions figure of around 12,500 tonnes. And this is the figure that we're looking to reduce. As I say, it applies to energy supplies what we actually pay for, things that we have control over. So gas and electric in the buildings, fleet vehicles with diesel and petrol, which are gradually being changed over to hybrid and electric where possible. Now within the draft plan, we focused on 7 themes. We've already discussed community leadership and council operations. When we come on to things like building better places outlined in the plan, what we're talking about there is the changes that we can influence and control through the planning process. So where new developments and major applications are coming in, we're making assessments and ensuring they accord with the London plan and the net zero target there. We've already discussed clean and green energy and the idea that we could, where we can, we will purchase energy on a green tariff. We're also looking at waste management, and this is how we control the waste arising from our own operation predominantly. And we've also got a section in the plan around climate change, adaptation and mitigation. And these are the things that we can do as an organisation to help mitigate our own effects and act as an example to others in the community, be it residents or businesses or schools. And then finally, we get to the concept of carbon offsetting, where we've reduced everything as far as we can. We're then thinking about, well, how do we offset those carbon emissions? And the idea behind that is we have a large woodland resource, we've got lots of open space, and can we be using some of that resource to sequestrate carbon, to actually store carbon in the open and green spaces? And there's some work been going on around trying to identify how much we're currently storing and what we may need to do in terms of tree planting to help reduce our carbon balance even further. So in terms of the public consultation, which is currently live, we put that together with input from the comms team and the community engagement team and devised an online survey. That was released on the 29th of March. We are planning webinars for residents associations, and we're also looking to do some follow-up direct emailing to stakeholders that we think will be interested, particularly in terms of schools and businesses. And the aim really is for a widest engagement as possible, because we feel that this particular plan is something that spans across the whole of the borough. We want engagement on it. We want people to understand what we're trying to do and help us shape the plan that will go back to Cabinet in July. And that concludes the short presentation. Hopefully that was useful, and if there are any questions, Chairman, please fire away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. First question I have, maybe it's just a point of clarity really. Within the paper that went to Cabinet, it says that the council has given a commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030, but then other times it says that this is an aim. I guess I just wonder how realistic is it, how achievable is it, and how confident are we at this stage that we are able to either achieve it or get exceptionally close to that?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it is an achievable target personally, because there are ways it can be achieved. It's not a just sort of striking out with a target and not really thinking about it. There are things we can do to get there. We're already, as you probably saw, have reduced the carbon emissions quite considerably over the last 10 years. We recently switched to purchasing green energy, which is going to make quite a large dent in that, probably take another 5,500–6,000 tonnes out of that figure. And then we're looking to reduce the residual amount over the next 10 years. Now, we will arrive at a figure which needs to be offset. I have no doubt about that. And at that point, I think there will need to be a decision made based on what the costs are of doing that in 10 years' time. But I think technically it's an achievable target. It just has to be reviewed, I think, closer to the time when it becomes a reality of being carbon neutral and wanting to achieve that aim by 2030 to make sure it is still achievable at that point in time. But I see no reason why it wouldn't be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Two members have indicated, so we'll go to Councillor Dillon and then Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, David. That's a good presentation. I have a few questions, and I think you've already answered one just now from the Chairman's question. Gas and electric, we've made considerable savings there. How have we made those savings on gas and then electric? Our vehicles, have we begun to purchase a hybrid, or have we moved from diesel to petrol? And the other concern is carbon offsetting. when we get to my fear is always that is the easy way out is to buy yourself carbon offset. And in order to be green and really properly green, we need to be not buying ourselves into it, but you know, obviously there will be an element of it because you can't do it 100%. But what kind of figure do you think in 10 years' time are we going to be at as a percentage? And do you think there are other things that we could do that we may be reluctant to do, as it were? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Very good questions there. So first of all, how was the target reached? There's a couple of factors at play there. The first would be that back in 2008-9, the council made a commitment to its first climate change strategy, and that set out the high-level principles of what it was going to do during that period. So first of all, there was a commitment to do something. The second thing so from that, there was then demand reduction works that went on. And if you think about the Civic in particular, we did things like LED lighting improvements. We went for more efficient boilers, more efficient chillers, going back on your earlier comments that I was listening to, for the infrastructure at the Civic Centre and other places. There was also, of course, the LED street lighting programme, and that had a huge impact on the energy consumption. So all good things were done. But there was another factor at play, and I mentioned the buying green energy. Now, the UK power network has substantially decarbonised over the last 10 years as well. And there have been days in the UK where virtually all of our electricity, if not all of it, has been supplied from renewable sources. So that is decarbonising the electrical power that comes through to us. So that's had a big impact. So two things at play there. So what is left is the residual fossil fuel element, which is basically used for heating, hot water and space heating. And the technology around that has become more efficient. And that's an area which we need to look at more closely over the next 10 years as to how do we actually remove that element altogether. And there will be a move towards air source heating, ground source heating, and updating with less. It's still reliant on electrical energy, of course, but if the grid's decarbonising and it's using less power and you're getting more heat output, it's more efficient. So I can see the trend falling off more and more and more over the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, so that we arrive at a residual figure, providing we're still buying green electricity, that is relatively low. And I'll try and put a figure on that later, if I may. But I would suggest that it's all of those factors have helped reduce it and will continue to reduce it. You mentioned vehicles as well. And yes, there's been a lot of work done by the transport side of things, transport manager and the team over there, to move vehicles away from petrol and replace them with hybrid and electric vehicles. I think it was about 50 or so last year, and there's another 50 plus scheduled this year. And they're changing those vehicles where they can be effective. And it's not yet effective to try and change a waste collection vehicle. I can't think of a technical term for it at the moment, but the big lorries that come around, the dustbin lorries, they can't quite be electric yet because the technology is not there. But that may improve potentially things like hydrogen or other forms of energy over the next few years. But where we can't do that, we've made all of the diesel vehicles Euro 6, so that's the highest standard, and things are being changed. If they haven't been changed already, they are becoming Euro 6, and that's really driving the emissions down from those vehicles. Now, moving on to offsetting, if you take all of that into account, all of those things that happen, we may find ourselves much lower in terms of emissions on the vehicles by 2030. They may be almost negligible, and that's a fair chunk. We may have reduced the fossil fuel element of the heating requirement quite considerably as well, and switched that over to electrical rather than gas. So there are dependencies around it, but if we are still buying green energy by 2030, if it's still available to us, and we've negotiated those contracts and we've reduced all of the fossil fuel commitments, we should be down, I think, to a very low figure. Now, if you then factor in any changes to the accommodation strategy over that time, and you're thinking about the civic centre and how it's being used, how the space is being divided up, post-COVID, it could look very, very different as to how many people are still coming into the office. And you may find that footprint has reduced even more. So I personally think we'll be in a situation where we're not having to spend anything like we would currently have to spend in order to offset our carbon. The other dependency on that, of course, is how much people are charging for a tonne of carbon in 2030. So there's a lot of crystal ball stuff, but the process, if you like, the trajectory of reducing, buying green and then offsetting seems to be the most sound methodology for approaching this particular problem. Hopefully that answers your questions, Councillor.
Thank you. Just before we move back to Councillor Dillon, David, is it possible to just unshare your screen or just take that down?
Oh, beg your pardon, yeah.
Back to the gallery view. I think from my perspective that makes that easier as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, sorry about
that. No worries. Councillor Dillon, did you wish to come back on any of those parts?
Yes, if I may. It's good that we're looking at the kind of air-to-air and heat pump kind of scenarios. I mean, that's great. My question would be, has the council begun to think of retrofitting council blocks, etc., with those, and then further reduce? That's probably going to be very, very difficult and quite expensive. But then, could we look at electric boilers, for instance? Again, you got to weigh it up, because there's an expense over, and then you achieve your efficiencies later on. My other concern would be, or it's not a concern, it's a question, and you're better placed than me guess, but would the carbon offsetting values, as you put it, become almost like a futures market, where you're able to start predicting and trading on it and buying it up? Because it's all, as we all start to become policy compliant, those prices are going to be pushed up. Or am I thinking of it in the wrong way? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. No, you're thinking of it in exactly the right way there with the carbon allowances, and that's something that the UK has done and dabbled in the past, with things like the carbon reduction commitment and the idea that you would buy and sell allowances. So it was a scheme that was brought through programme at 2009, 2010. So we've kind of been there in the local government sense, and we understand what that looks like and how it works. But it is all changing, and there is a more commercial side to it now, and that's probably more of the futures market that you're referring to, and that is out there. There is, as much as there is a price for energy, there is a price for carbon as well. So that's the first thing. Now, the other thing you mentioned was around retrofitting existing council buildings, air source heat pumps and those kind of things. They require really a newer building with a higher standard of thermal efficiency in order to be as efficient as they can be. So you're looking at it over a long term. You're saying, well, as buildings come up for decommissioning and demolition, that you build to a higher standard and you put them in. But wherever you can, the approach with a council corporate building particularly will be to find the most efficient form of heating that you can put in there, and the most efficient form of heat recovery or cooling, that kind of thing, and insulation as well. Where we're looking at more of the leadership role, for example, with housing, where we're not controlling those emissions, but we're trying to make things better for residents generally, we're supporting schemes predominantly where we can improve the thermal efficiency of that building and let them make their own decisions around buying green power or switching to a green tariff, because we simply don't have any duty or power in that area. But with our own housing stock, we can in fact improve the thermal efficiency, and that's the sort of thing we're looking to promote through the leadership angle rather than through the carbon target. Was there anything else that I've missed there? I think that's covered it. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, David.
Councillor.
I've got various questions. I'll limit it initially, and then let anyone else come in. On your deck, the fleet, it specifically said bought vehicles. I believe that the council also has other vehicles with contractors, and so on. It sort of brings me into sort of the procurement strategy, which I think is on page 37, sort of to outline what exactly that is in terms of this strategy. Because I want to sort of understand that, but also you did mention the electric refuse collecting vehicles. I mean, I have seen them. I know that they have been trialled in various councils in the UK to see how they work, and whether or not that's something that could possibly be explored. And on the carbon capture side, there's a lot of emphasis on tree planting. Now, I know trees and certain types of trees, hardwood trees, are good for collecting that, but I'm also reading that there's issues with, one being the aftercare. So we plant a lot of saplings and young trees. What sort of how much carbon are they capturing before they reach maturity? How long that takes to happen? So the aftercare of them to keep them alive, because last summer was very, very hot. I went down in my ward and was watering some of the trees that were newly planted by officers. And also I'm aware that with the increase with the carbon that's been collected by trees, I understand that it can have an effect on the foliage of certain trees, which impacts on wildlife eating the leaves, moths and butterflies laying their larvae on leaves, and it can actually impact on the nature. So I'm sort of looking where we are maybe potentially missing a trick in terms of other innovations that may be could be put in place instead of tree planting. And the other thing with tree planting is the impact on the water table. The trees need to get draw their water from somewhere, and we've had a lot of dry patches. Even with winter, we have dry winters. So tree planting is all well and good, but I think there's an element that potentially we're missing here. And if there's any chance, I'll come up with any other questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. If I can take the last thing first regarding the offsetting. There's a couple of strands to that. The first one I would suggest is, yes, there's a lot of tree planting involved there. There's also the vegetation management, as you say, and thinking about some of the other impacts that might have. And one of the things that officers are doing at the moment is looking at developing a strategy around this. So there is some time and some resource to be invested into understanding exactly what it is we need to do, which then ties back to this strategy. So we probably couldn't claim to have all the answers right now. We just are conscious of the direction we need to go in order to make sure we make the right choices, first of all. But yes, I do take those points, take those on. The other part about offsetting is that one of the things we have been looking to is where we have the available land, and land that may not be able to be used for other or for alternatives, is just completely dead, redundant land that we cannot simply use for anything, is the idea of solar farms or renewable power projects. And these are the sort of things that we've also been discussing internally, and we're trying to build a vision around as well. So it's not just so much a case of trees and the natural solution. Can we look at something that's a bit more technological as well? So that's part of it. You mentioned vehicles again. As I mentioned earlier, there's where we can, we have changed to hybrid and electric. I have a feeling, and you have to forgive me because I only recently rejoined the council back in January, but I think that we have actually trialled electric refuse collection vehicles, but I would need to check that and come back to you. So if you could give me a bit of a week or two on that, then I'll go and consult with colleagues and come back to you and let you know bit more detail about what actually happened there if we did do it. I think I've covered everything there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor.
Sorry, thank you. There was the other thing about the procurement strategy that was referenced on page 37 in the pack. I just wanted to sort of, if that could be expanded upon in relation to the climate strategy.
Okay, is this in relation to the clean and green energy? Because I've just got the report in front of me. I haven't got the pack.
Sorry, my cat's sitting on the papers. So, it's part C2, the council's own operations.
Okay, C2.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of.
Yes.
Okay, so that's C2.6.
Yes, please. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So what that is related to is more the goods and services that we buy. So somewhere within our procedures, we need to be writing in this kind of sustainability related criteria into contract preliminaries and into our procurement specifications. And this is what this is alluding to. It's not so much the gas and the power side of it. It's more about the types of equipment that we're purchasing and looking at the whole life costs around that and end of life costs as well. And it's trying to sort of focus a bit more. We're probably doing a lot of this already, don't get me wrong, but it's about tying it back to this particular strategy more than anything and linking it to the climate change objective so it has a wider context, and then also understanding where we can go a bit deeper with it as well.
Sorry, Chair, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, with that, it was more to do with, I know it's what he's linking with it, if there was anything more that could be expanded upon beyond what was in the pack, because obviously I know it will be about suppliers when it's stuff that's written into the contracts, or when the council contracts with someone or a company or whatever to have a service, making sure that those prerequisites are written into that contract, that we're having a supplier that's of a certain level of carbon,
Yes, yeah, I think that
carbon and so forth.
I think that is certainly the aspiration, but I think the other thing to take into account is that where we do a lot of our purchasing, we're buying through consortia and we're buying through a shared resource. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to tighten specifications down to the point where you may actually be excluding suppliers. So sometimes they have to be a little bit broader. But by my reckoning, what I always try and do with procurement strategies is write in language around it being the optimal, and then you have an optimal balance of these different criteria. But again, procurement is, if we need to know more about that specifically, I would probably need to go and talk to procurement colleagues about that and find out exactly what they're doing and what their longer term vision is in these particular areas, because there's so many different nuances to when you put a contract out to what sort of response you're going to get if you tighten things down just a bit too much, that you're starting to exclude rather than include. So I can certainly look into it in a bit more depth and come back to you with some follow-up answers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Back to Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, this is a really easy one, and I apologise, it's quite low level. The council, I mean, when I still get paper packs delivered to me. How much paper do we use currently as a council? How does that affect our carbon footprint, and what are we doing to reduce that?
A very good question, Councillor, and it is something I would have to come back to you on something that specific. I don't have the answer to it tonight, unfortunately.
I thought you may have to, and yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Councillor Farley.
Sorry, I'm trying to work this thing. That's better. Take the hand off. Sorry, I'm going to take up the time. Please, anyone else, feel free to jump in. I was also wanting to. I mean, this is an opportunity for the council to be quite bold and show some innovation. What's happening with regards to? I mean, there's got a lot of properties that that they can put in their own. I know it says about encouraging people to have electric plug-ins for their vehicles. It's something that the national government is pushing, that new vehicles will be electric. But obviously we've got a lot of high rises. We've got a lot of areas where it's not easy access. I'm not sure, unless I've missed it, but I'm not sure where that is. Something that's sort of in the report. And then the other thing I was curious about was the reference to encouraging people to grow their own food, which is great. But I'm also aware that some of the, obviously again back to high rises, and people can't really do that. So obviously there's allotments, but a lot of the allotments are oversubscribed. So I mean, it's trying to expand where we've got space, because again it's also greenery as well, and basically increasing the allotment plots that we have in the borough. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. The just to come back to pin this back to something. What we're trying to do with this document, I think, is set out where we want to lead. What we want to do. We appreciate there's a lot of work to be done in terms of baselining around some of these ideas and building them into proper action plans with targets. So that they're all very valid points. But the reason we want to do that is so that we can demonstrate to others that we are leading in the area, that we've understood the issues, we've baselined it, we've set a target, and now this is the direction of travel we're going to take. I completely accept the point around the how people are living in high rises and electric vehicles and that kind of thing. And I think that starts with us sorting out our own staff green travel, demonstrating how we're going to change the way in which we travel to work and how we travel for business. It links across to the highways and infrastructure side as to what we're doing with the promotion of charging points in car parks and public spaces, that kind of thing. But these are all things that seem to happen separate from each other at the moment. And the purpose of the strategy, I feel, is to try and tie them all back to something central so that everyone can have a clear vision on where we're actually going with it and how these different strands are playing their own part in the overall target. So in answer to your question, we start by doing our own staff green travel plan, we link the other strands to it, and we use that as an example, and that's part of our leadership role. That's how I kind of envision it working. And I think the same approach would apply to things like allotments and people growing their own food. Yes, we do understand that that is an aspirational thing for a lot of people. They simply won't be able to do it. But where they can do it, where we understand how much allotment space we've got, is there any scope for expanding it? How can we encourage people to do things in their own gardens? Or do things collectively? Those are the sort of things that I think we need to read about, we need to research and understand and see how they can be brought back and again put into the leadership element of what we're trying to do. And I personally see a series of web pages potentially around these different subjects, so that when different ideas and opportunities come up, we're ready to promote them and put them out there. But these are all they're all interlinked, and that's why I think this is quite an aspirational strategy in terms of all the things it's trying to tie together. I think there's a lot of work to do in terms of collecting those thoughts like you just expressed there and making sure they are incorporated in this plan. And that's why we want, the key reason we want the consultation to be a success is so we can start pulling all those ideas in and linking them to the different areas and objectives that we've set out. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that one. Councillor Dillon again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a question for you, really. David's going to go away and we're going to go into a consultation period. Once that's over, will David be coming back to us? This is such an important part of, it goes beyond possibly well, into our retirements, definitely, these policies that we're going to be creating. Will David be coming back, and will we have another chance to consult and discuss as a committee before this goes elsewhere, or is this the final time that David comes along before?
Yeah, so this is our opportunity to understand more about it. Like David said and gave the presentation, now goes out to public consultation, of which we as councillors you can respond as a councillor or as a resident, or however, or any group you wish to. I believe it then comes back to Cabinet in July. However, we can then input into it like we would do normally for the forward, when we look at the forward plan. So when I can pick up the dates when we come to it later, but I think the intention is it will be presented at the July Cabinet. So therefore, at our meeting, without knowing the exact date yet, but probably June, we may want to make sure that we have sight of it to be able to comment either as a committee or reflect on what the consultation feedback has provided.
Yeah, I think as a committee that would be very important. If we could, I'll be very grateful, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, I think we can build that into the future work programme and link that to the forward plan for when that is, get those confirmed dates for Cabinet. Again, just from noting the report here, it says July Cabinet, assuming that is a target that's achieved. We can make sure that we align our work with that as well. Okay, thank you very much, David. Anyone else have any questions or comments they wish to make? No, otherwise thank you very much, and as always encourage everybody to participate in a consultation that goes on, either yourself or by sharing it with groups or residents that you are well connected with in your respective wards. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chairman. Much appreciated.
Okay, so this moves us on to agenda item 8, which Fiona is going to present to us on the prevent strategy and to provide an update on activities that the council's been taken on this and partners that we're working with around this to ultimately provide a safe environment within the community, I think.
Thank you. Sorry, just unmuting myself. So thank you very much. So you've had my report, but as part of the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act 2015, the council has a duty to work towards the aims of prevent, which is part of the government's counter-terrorism strategy, which is called Contest. And as the council is our role to coordinate a local partnership approach. And so obviously this report provides an update on how we're delivering against that duty and taking forward our leadership role in the area in terms of working with partners around meeting the objectives. So, which is about trying to support and safeguard those who are vulnerable to radicalisation and being drawn towards extremism or committing acts of terrorism. So within the duty, there are sort of, I suppose, 4 or 5 key areas that we have to work to, that we have to respond to, and make sure that we are working collaboratively across all the agencies who also are covered in the Act in terms of having a duty to work towards the aims of prevent and working with us as the local authority. So the first part of that, and the key part of prevent, I would say, is around safeguarding. So how do we work together to make sure that we're safeguarding those who are vulnerable and identifying those individuals at an early stage before they're involved or moving towards being involved in a criminal act, because prevent is the we're really trying to get in at that early stage with people when they are particularly vulnerable to going down that path. So we need to make sure that we've got those safeguarding procedures and referral pathways in place, which we do in the borough. So we have a multi-agency panel that meets on a monthly basis, which involves, again, local agencies, partners working together to identify what support and interventions we can put into place for those individuals who are vulnerable. Again, it's about making sure that we are supporting individuals in a positive manner. This isn't about criminalising individuals. This is about supporting those who are vulnerable, as we would within any other sort of safeguarding responsibilities that we have. Following on from sort of the referrals, it's about making sure there's no point having those panels in place if we aren't actually receiving the referrals or raising awareness. So training for staff and partners, agencies is really key in terms of raising that awareness, understanding how to identify those who might be vulnerable, and making the right referrals. So we also lead in terms of making sure that that training for staff is delivered. We've delivered training to more than 5,000 staff across the borough from within those different settings, including education, health, voluntary and other settings. And we sort of access the Home Office e-learning modules and face-to-face training packages to deliver those so that it's consistent across the borough, and also it enables us to have that relationship with our services and our agencies who feel that they can trust us and they can have those conversations with us as the local authority around this quite sensitive area to make sure that we are supporting individuals in the right way. So that's an important part of what we're doing. The other part is about actually understanding what are the issues, how it's changed. Prevent was introduced back in 2007, and certainly the influence of extremist groups has changed in nature since then. We've seen quite a growth in the influence more from the extreme right wing side of things in recent times. So it's about how do we respond to that? What does that look like in our local area, and how can we work together to not only identify those who are vulnerable and understanding how the organisations sort of recruit individuals and radicalise individuals, but also about how can we build resilience in the first place. So what sort of activity can we put in place to sort of help go for help and support. So it's really important that we understand what that changing nature looks like as agencies so that we can identify and support individuals where that's needed, because it is becoming a much more complex picture than in previous times. So it's about keeping up with that change, and the online space, I'm sure you're all aware, is forever changing, and its impact and influence, and also whatever is happening globally, internationally and at home in terms of how that influences how people are then exploited online as well. So and how that manifests itself and affects our local communities. So that's really important. So it's key that we have those conversations, that we're working with our partners and our communities in understanding what that looks like and raising that awareness. So that's sort of really important then, why we have to be having a partnership approach. So we do have a Prevent Partnership board in place, which involves all of the representatives from all of the key agencies, so that we work together. We set a plan every year to see what are our priorities, what do we need to be doing to ensure that we're meeting the aims of Prevent and our duties within that. So, and then finally, so yeah, moving on to the building resilience, which I think is actually, for me, is the key part of Prevent. Yes, we want to safeguard those who are vulnerable and put support in, but also it's about how do we work with our schools, with our community groups, with other organisations, about enabling individuals to build their own resilience. How do we build that cohesion? How do we equip those individuals with those as I said, critical thinking skills, understanding and respect for others, whilst developing their own sense of identity, belonging, aspirations. All of that sort of enables people to be more resilient to an extremist message, to be able to challenge it and to have sort of provide a counter narrative to some of those ideas, and but also understand what are the challenges, what are the issues for individuals that sort of might draw them towards that sort of mindset in the first place. So it's really important that we give space for people to have those discussions, topics in schools where people can talk about promoting equality, diversity, challenging discrimination, tackling hate, having those, being able to be open in terms of having those conversations. So it's about working with our partners and agencies to do that as well. So you know, that's just a little bit of an overview of how we're working, what we're trying to do in terms of making sure that we're meeting our duty in Prevent, which is really about safeguarding us all and safeguarding those individuals who are vulnerable. So I'm happy to take any questions on my report or just generally about Prevent.
Fiona, thank you very much for that update and presentation. Councillor Farley, first of all, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Fiona. I just wanted to get a little bit more understanding about the training for staff. If you could elaborate a bit more on that, to understand on what sort of is being done, what the nature of the training actually is, please. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a variety of training that's available. There are e-learning modules that the Home Office have developed, so every member of staff is able to go through, and that's just a basic introduction to Prevent. Well, there are several different strands of the training actually. The first one is just a basic understanding of Prevent, what radicalisation is, how to identify vulnerabilities, and then how to make a referral, how to share that concern that you might have. So there's that sort of basic e-learning. There's then another one which is based around looking at referrals, how to make a referral, what sort of things you need to consider, what might be this, you know, what are the things that might raise concern, I also deliver face-to-face workshops to groups of staff and external partners as well. So there's an opportunity then to go in more depth to what to look out for, what to consider, and again how to refer. And that builds a really good relationship with myself and our partners and other agencies in terms of having that relationship, knowing that they can how to refer, but being able to have that conversation with me as well if they're unsure about things. So we deliver that training. Also, we do look at sort of specialist topics. So recently we did a specific training session for safeguarding leads in schools and our partner agencies on understanding the emerging threat from the extreme right. What does that look like? Because that's a changing picture and a new concern. So just to make sure that everyone's up to speed in terms of what that looks like. So it varies really from sort of face-to-face workshops to e-learning. But it's all the training that we recommend is Home Office approved. So so that's how it varies really.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just follow up on that. So can you sort of, I'm trying to get sort of understand the also the extent of the learning. So sort of like these day courses, are they, these modular e-learning, are they meant to do them in one sitting? Are they do how is it sort of structured in terms of how long it takes?
Okay, so the basic trainings are online. I think it's about an hour and a half to complete. Same with my workshops. There's about sort of an hour and a half, 2 hours long in terms of, and it is a basic introduction. But there are opportunities for other key staff to access other training and learning. So that's sort of there's a basic, and then the Home Office provides lots of other different workshops, half-day sessions, full-day training sessions on different aspects that key staff can access, and all the sort of members of the channel panel that we have access to those specific training courses to have a deeper understanding of extremism and what that looks like in all the different guises, and how that's sort of developing. So so there's a combination of different, but the basic that we give is a sort of a generic the e-learning, like I say, you can do in one sitting, and then sort of like a 2-hour workshop session that I deliver.
Okay. Are these sort of the refreshers, like as you said, obviously the changing dynamics of radicalism? Are you updating based on those changes, or are you giving people refreshers on a periodic basis?
I do a combination of both. So I do. So the Home Office packages I deliver as the Home Office packages, and then I've developed a sort of a refresher session that I do with an update in terms of what the changing picture looks like. So we do a combination of both, really, so depending on the needs of the organisation. So many of the at the moment the Home Office are revising the face-to-face package that we do to bring that up to date. So many of the agencies have had that delivered several times now. So I've sort of just putting more of an up-to-date session on that as well. So you don't lose people, but although repetitive is good because it sinks in, but also you want to give people something that helps re-stimulate their interest as well, and makes it pertinent to the changing nature of what's going on out there. And it is changing, and we're seeing quite a lot of difference in terms of how people are influenced to behave or act, and it's not as simplistic as people think it is in terms of a particular ideology or a particular mindset. It's becoming much more blurred now as well with sort of the way the internet works. So it's also understanding it from a wider safeguarding vulnerability space as well, that radicalisation is part of all of the wider risks that are out there in terms of vulnerabilities for people, and how that sits, and how it fits all together, really, in terms of how somebody might become susceptible to that and what it looks like.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Fiona. We talk around partners and agencies that we work with on this.
Yeah.
Are you able to share who the types of organisations that we work with on this are?
Yes, absolutely. So because as part of the duty under the Act, it was all public bodies and specific agencies that were identified. So we work with all our health services locally, so that's community and hospital settings, mental health services, probation, police, schools, further and higher education establishment. So it's a wide range of partners that we work with in terms of managing our safeguarding responsibilities, particularly under the duty. So, and offering them that support as well. So, and they're all part of that partnership board.
Thank you very much. A couple of members indicated, so we go to Councillor Deville and then Councillor Brightman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. All I was wondering, it said you're doing workshops for the children in schools, but after the lockdown, how have you been doing it?
That's been a challenge, but actually we have been doing some virtual sessions, so online sessions, and also we have been doing some sessions in schools where that's been COVID safe, in a COVID safe way, within the schools. So so we have been able to continue doing that, and within the restrictions that we've got at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Brightman.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Fiona, for your comprehensive report so far. There was something that I'm curious about, and it may well happen already, is in schools, are pupils in the teenage years subject to sort of psych eval tests where all children sit the same test? There's no right or wrong answer, but it does give those with the experience to explore their answers an indicator that somebody might be going off track or becoming disgruntled with the world around them.
I'm not aware of us doing tests like that in Hillingdon. I'd be a bit concerned, but so no is the answer, I guess, in terms of I'm not aware that that's what we're doing. In terms of, I think we have to be very careful with Prevent, that we have to enable people to have the space to express themselves, and I think it's about when that expression becomes a concern or a worry that it might be or could become harmful to themselves or to other people if they explore the ideas that they've got or continue to explore and move down that path. So really it's about how in schools, how staff know their pupils or are able to recognise when they're having the sessions where they're discussing things, whether that's a healthy discussion or whether there's something more concerning to it. But that's also the role that I play for the council in terms of those agencies being able to then have that conversation with myself to see, is this something that we should be concerned about, or is this Prevent, or is this something else? So yeah, that's. But we don't do these tests per se, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. In terms of numbers, how many referrals do we as a council receive? I guess just trying to understand how big a size of a, if I say, problem is this, or how many, potentially using the word prevent, how many people have we really helped from potentially avoiding going down the wrong path, or taking, like you say, what is maybe an alternative or a strong viewpoint to an extreme level?
Case numbers are managed by, because we work collaboratively with SO15 Prevent Policing, so and channel cases, case management is held by them. So in terms of numbers, I didn't bring the official channel published numbers with me. What I can say is that we have seen an increase in the numbers of referrals over the time of the panel. The panel started in 2010, and I can say that the number of referrals, has increased probably fourfold or more since then. The numbers of individuals who actually need a specific intervention, probably around sort of half of those who are initially referred might need some sort of intervention or support, further support, I would say, in terms of what we're experiencing. Specific numbers, I can come back to you on those later and provide that if you like.
Okay, thank you. And just to pick up the point you made there, where you said numbers have probably increased, would that also, I guess, link to the point you made at the start of your presentation? If we were to categorise the types of extremism, would you say that certainly broadened as well, has it, alongside the numbers of individuals?
Yes, it has, and I think there sort of probably has to be a caveat in terms of the numbers as well, because I think there's generally a more raising of awareness in terms of making referrals of concerns as well. So that's probably reflected in what we've seen, but also the activity of extremist organisations and the change in that picture, and they are reaching out to sort of younger people as well. So we're sort of seeing that in the pattern of what's coming through. So yeah, in that sense, certainly we're seeing that.
Okay, Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Chairman. The report is a very good report, by the way. It mentions training for staff. I just think, from my own perspective, what I would like to see is some sort of a training day or a briefing for elected members. We deal with the public on a daily basis, and there are times when we do have, interesting characters coming forward, which may be of concern. And I think, as an elected member, for me personally, it'd be good to see, signposts of what avenues we go down to ensure that this is brought to the right people's attention. And it may be nothing, but as an elected member, it's reassuring from my perspective to know that I've forwarded it onto the right people. And if it turns out to be nothing, so be it. But if there is a very small chance it could be something far worse, at least we've made steps to try and prevent that.
Thank you. There are some specific resources available for members, so I'm happy to take that forward as an action if members would like me to put something together specifically for members. I have provided training for members in the past, but absolutely happy to look at that and put something together if that would be welcomed.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would be good, and I think, again, just from a wider perspective, I know where we have member development days. I know we obviously circumstances the last 12 months haven't enabled those recently, but we're often almost asked, are there any topics that could be included? That seems a sensible one that we could try to include. Councillor DeVille, you have a hand raised. Is that from your previous one, or did you have something new? Okay, fine. Okay, I don't see anyone else indicating. So Fiona, thank you very much for the presentation. Also, thank you for the work you do on this. I think, like you say, the main part out of this is around the safeguarding, not just of individuals who may be potentially vulnerable, but obviously of the wider community within Hillingdon, because we want to prevent anything getting out of hand for people. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That brings us on to agenda item 9, which is the past review update of homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying. Dan, thank you for sitting through the meeting with us this evening, getting to your item. The report shows the number of recommendations that went to Cabinet nearly 2 years ago now, or were agreed by Cabinet nearly 2 years ago, and provides an update on each of those 5 in terms of what the Council has been able to do in progressing those. Dan, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add further to what is in the report.
Only really to add that we're continuing to press on with the recommendations to embed them, particularly working with schools, but very happy to take questions from members.
Okay, happy to open this up to members. I think some of you may have been involved in this review, others not so much. Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. No, I was not, but I'd like to ask a question. Obviously, the emphasis for schools. It is known that there were some concerns within some communities and so on that LGBT is a controversial topic. I was wondering whether or not how successfully embedding that is getting into schools, and what kind of, or if any, sort of pushback or rejection is happening maybe in certain schools or certain communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. I mean, my experience of working with schools is that they've wholeheartedly embraced this and linked this as much part of a much wider and stronger approach to behaviour and tolerance in schools. So there's a number of programmes that schools run as part of their curriculum, and it's also, as I said before, part of sort of modelling role model behaviour in and around schools. And so my experience of working with schools is it's very positive in this area.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I know obviously we mentioned that some of the interaction with schools have been limited in the past 12 months due to circumstances. I presume this is something we're looking to continue. It wasn't a one-off exercise. We're going to sort of keep going back and revisit and maybe target different age or year groups, or as people progress through schools?
Yeah, absolutely. Then this is an ongoing program, and the fact that the number of the issues that this review highlighted have been built into the sort of curriculum for children, it highlights the importance of it. And the fact is that it's part of education for all children.
Okay, that's good. I guess just for committee's, I say, benefit information, I actually had a resident within my own ward who wrote to me and said they were very pleased we were doing this. So small wins, but again, recognition that our work as a committee actually gets recognised and is received by actual residents. Councillor Dillon? Currently on mute, I'm afraid, sorry.
Let's get back into the civic, I'd say. Now I've lost my train of thought. Dan, thanks for the report, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 4 on your report, have we had any schools kind of join these Stonewall Champions program that we know of, or are they still being encouraged?
Most schools are being encouraged. I mean, we tend to see sort of stronger engagement in secondary schools, generally speaking. But also, a number of schools have said that they're exploring or looking into some of those other areas. But we can certainly provide once we kind of, I mean, schools. The focus of schools over the last 12 months has been very much on, COVID, pandemic, etc. So, but I think it would certainly be worthwhile exploring that more fully with schools once they get back into a more of an even keel, and then we can bring back another update and fuller update to this committee.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, thanks very much. I think on that bit, then we will note that as an update. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Okay,
so agenda item 10 is the forward plan. So noting the earlier comments, having looked at this in Cabinet meeting 8th of July is the Climate Change Action Plan, which is a new item on the forward plan. So noting Councillor Dillon's comments, Liz, I look to work with you offline in terms of how we can get advanced sight of this, what feedback we can provide and how members can get sight of this before it goes through Cabinet. Obviously there's channels for groups to make comments on items that go to Cabinet as well, but I think, yeah, given that that's requested, that is something we will try to do ahead of that one, aiming for 8th of July, and we can tie that looking into our work programme in the next item. Anyone have Councillor Dillon? Yes.
Take myself off mute. Can I just ask what Microsoft Azure is? Sounds like a nice holiday, but it's probably not.
Can I answer that for him?
You can answer it for him.
Jazz. Microsoft Azure is a cloud-based platform where you can host your services, your servers, hardware, software, and for example, the Office 365 platform itself, which you use, the cloud-based platform, is hosted in Microsoft Azure. But apart from the software as a service, they also provide hardware as a service. So in other words, rather than you having your own data center, you could actually have all your servers in the cloud, and that be their cloud. So we probably in Hillingdon are all using Azure or AWS as a cloud platform. Would you like any more explanation, or is that sufficient?
It works for me, but I'm not sure about the rest of the committee. They may want some more in-depth knowledge at a later date.
We probably could get the ICT to basically come to us and do all these explanations. Probably one of the reasons I would like us to consider ICT as an item is basically to bring us up to date as to where we are as a council with the cloud-based services and who are our providers, etc., etc.?
I think both of those points are fair and valid. I think from Councillor Din's perspective, I would say when the cabinet agenda for the 17th of June comes out, I would expect that item will have further clarity around what that actual service and infrastructure they provide is, which probably gives the detail at a level that people who are not as technologically advanced as IT professionals will understand. Councillor Tubadar, I think your point is also valid that in terms of the future review that we may look to undertake, this is something that could certainly be considered within that. Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on the forward plan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very welcome. Okay, thank you. Happy to note that, which will then take us on to agenda item 11. Now, as you'll be aware, we now reach April, which is the end of the municipal year. So next month in May, we don't have a meeting. However, hopefully, if you all get your own way, you'll all be coming back onto this committee next year, I'm sure. But I think in terms of the June meeting, we obviously have the scoping reports, which is what we've discussed in terms of the next review topic to be selected. Apart from that, we don't have anything else further lined up in terms of specific topics for that meeting, but I think that meeting's agenda will build itself out once we take away some of those scoping reports and see which of those can also be included as information items, as well as standing items that come back to us as a committee for the work programme going forward. And hopefully, optimistically, that June meeting may be face-to-face. Councillor Dillon?
That was what I was going to ask.
Yeah, so at the moment, as you're probably aware, from the 7th of May, legally we are not, as things stand, able to continue with virtual meetings because there's some central government legislation on that. So unless that changes, we will have to move back into a physical format from the 7th of May. Obviously we'll keep you posted on that, but that's the situation as it stands. So it's looking likely, yes, that we will be back in the room for our June meeting. But obviously that will be confirmed nearer the time, and just in case the situation changes.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else have any further comments on the work programme or anything else? Otherwise, we'll close the meeting. No, thank you very much. If everybody can just remain on mute whilst the feed is closed. And just to be absolutely clear before we do, Fiona, Liz, there's nothing that needed to be reverted back to in terms of prevent for part 2. I think everything that was asked was able to be answered in part 1, correct? Yep, seeing nods. Okay.
Yep, from my perspective, definitely. I don't think there was anything else. So I think we're all done on that item. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, fine. So we'll close the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance and input tonight.
Okay, just bear with me, please, while I end the stream.